Hello, everyone. Good afternoon or morning, wherever you're joining us from. My name's Carson Heady. I'm the director for Microsoft Elevate Nonprofit. And today I have this immense pleasure of being joined by Ed Lada, who is CEO of Goodwill Keystone. I'm going to have him do a more in-depth intro here in a moment, but the brainchild for this session today was, I was actually talking to Ed right before our Global Nonprofit Leader Summit. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to join because he had a prior commitment, which we understand. But I was lamenting the fact that we weren't able to get Ed up on stage because he's such a dynamic speaker, he's a thought leader, and he's just got a lot of incredible ideas, not only about how he's leveraging AI in his day to day, but also how his organization is leveraging it to empower the workforce and better meet their constituents. And so, really, we were brainstorming and thought, hey, like let's turn this into a live forum. So here's Ed. I'm going to have him introduce himself, and this is interactive. So I'll be monitoring the chat. Please feel free to throw in if you have any questions or things that you want to make sure we're discussing. But I can't tell you how excited I am to have Ed today. So Ed, without further ado, tell us a little bit about you.
Hey, Carson, I appreciate all the flattery remarks, man, and I do apologize for not making the summit, but I look forward to taking part in the next, hopefully. But I'm Ed Lada, President and CEO of Goodwill Keystone. For those of you that aren't aware of Goodwill, we're a federated model of nonprofits across North America and several international locations as well. There are 150 Goodwills across the nation, about a $9 billion entity kind of size and scope. My organization is in central and southeastern PA. We headquarters out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Give a little idea and context about my organization. We have been around for about 77 years, give or take. We have 1,600 employees, do about $110 million in annual revenue. We have 41 donated goods retail stores, which most people typically associate Goodwill in that context as one of the original social enterprises in America. But we're also the largest workforce developer provider nationally in North America. And so we're 10 minutes from 80% of every American, to kind of give you an idea of size and scope as a brand. But in my organization, again, has a pretty sophisticated kind of supply chain and whatnot. But we also find ourselves in this weird leadership position in regards to generative AI and AI literacy. My Goodwill in Pennsylvania is the first Goodwill in the country to teach AI literacy as part of our workforce development efforts, which we started in December 2023, January 2024. So, and I dipped my toe in AI almost 8 years ago using computer vision machine learning to identify fabric composition and things like that in a previous role. And so been paying attention for a hot minute and kind of stumbled upon maybe a little bit of subject matter expertise in the space. But and as a side job, I work as an adjunct professor at Penn State Harrisburg, teaching an experiential learning lab in AI for freshmen and seniors at Penn State Harrisburg. So just a little kind of tidbit about me.
Incredible. And it's great to see the familiar names and faces. I think one of the great conversations that I had at the Global Nonprofit Leader Summit was just around the genuine community that exists here. I think there's so much we can learn from each other. That is frankly, I'm always on a quest for learning more about how we can better serve nonprofits. And frankly, that was the impetus for this discussion today. Ed, AI is a hot topic, as you know, and I think a lot of folks, when we start to talk about AI, people are immediately thinking about different tools or LLMs, or they're thinking about different vendors or policies, and there's so much. From your perspective, where should leaders be going first? How should they fundamentally be thinking about AI today?
So I would take a point of view of what was once impossible is now possible, right? Especially in the nonprofit space. The tools are becoming so advanced so quickly that the ability to deliver your mission in more profound ways, way more efficient, way more effective, especially with downward pressure into funds being drying up for different mission services and things like that, and obviously growing competition in the space for those precious resources. My position for nonprofits is that every nonprofit should be leaning to the space, if for no better reason, just to understand where the technology is going, but then also how do you use the tool to deliver better mission and serve more people? And so, what was once impossible for nonprofits, heck, even small businesses, anyone across the board using the tools, is really becoming possible. We are looking at software completely different because of the way that coding has matured. And we are part of the Microsoft stack, and the tools as part of those. That ecosystem has allowed us to really fly and do some pretty amazing things. And kind of what's old is new too, right? Everything from robotic process automation meeting LLM integration to computer vision machine learning and so on and so on. Vibe coding. If you don't know what the vibe coding is, start diving in, understanding what that looks like. But really, conceptually, what was once impossible is now possible in a lot of ways using some of these tools. And that's kind of been our mental model as we teach it all the way down to the entry level positions on up and externally is really taking that framework of how to expand mission because of the tool.
I love it. And that's a mic drop quote right there. What was once impossible is now possible. And I'm finding, with a lot of the conversations that we have with nonprofit executives globally, the folks that are really winning right now with AI, it's not necessarily about the tool or tools per se. It's really about what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Going out and trying to figure out both internally and also from a constituent community facing perspective, what are the problems that we really want to solve? And that's the area where my team and I are most interested in really leaning in and helping invest and helping figure out where we can solve these problems together. I'm curious, Ed, AI is already in every organization. It's already there, whether we, have given it permission or not. Because of the different tools and what some people are bringing to bear, personally and professionally. You've said that many organizations are already operational with AI, even without that formal approval. What does that look like inside of a nonprofit today, from your experience, and how are you grappling with that and making sure that it's done the right way?
I see generative AI integration as like one of the biggest cultural moments for an organization and honestly individually, depending on your kind of view take on where the future is going. But at the end of the day, if you got into a room, and I'd be curious in the chat, how many of you feel like you've operationalized generative AI in any kind of significant way? Then ask the same question in a group or in a room. How many of you are individually using AI in your daily life, right? Especially at home and things like that. Then ask the first question again, like how many of you still believe that you're not operationalizing AI? Because the reality of it is that what I find is a lot of nonprofits and just companies in general, they have for-profit companies especially, they're concerned about governance and security, which of course we absolutely should be. I think that's the brilliance of Microsoft and the tech stack that Microsoft provides is, kind of best in class in that way. But the reality of it is that if you haven't created a culture that allows people to tinker in a safe environment, to really look at problem identification as a old school kind of root cause analysis to identify problems, your employees are likely solving their own problems. And part of the issue with shadow AI or secret cyborgs or whatever terminology you want to use is that your employees, if they're not incentivized to share how they're using the tools to solve for time poverty within their own personal and professional lives, they're not incentivized to tell you how they're using the tools that can possibly make your business better or your mission improved. And so, I find like a lot of companies are kind of hiding behind the governance and security aspect as a way to not lean in, when the reality of it is that the dam has already broke. And it's more than just, you're not putting fingers in the dam. The matter of the fact is like, okay, well, if our employees are using tools that are beyond our control and we have no real way of making sure that that proprietary information is getting out there, then the question then becomes, how do you control the water, right?
Yeah.
How do you get the water back in the aquarium or whatever visualization you need, because it's already happening, right? And so but the reality of it is there's a boom of opportunity there. I mean, some of the best ideas of AI integration within my organization came from the ground up. It's because they used it at home. and they were like, "Oh wait, this can be used at work." And instead of trying to put AI on existing process, we spend so much time focusing on that problem identification, right? What is that five why, that root cause, and attaching the right AI or generative AI solution, whatever it is, old school machine learning even, and applying it to the right problem. And so I think it's kind of getting over that fear, and also the fact that we are overwhelmed by the pace of change. That it's like I don't even know where to start, right? And so I think part of the start is like this is a cultural moment, this is a cultural problem more than it's a tech problem, and taking it upon yourself to really figure out, okay, how can I embrace this in a way that brings great ideas to the table, that alleviates fear from your employees to bring those ideas forward, and to create a safe environment to where they feel comfort in tinkering, in experimentation, and bringing some of those cool ideas forward. And that takes a lot of work.
Incredible broad strokes around, yeah, because I think a lot of organizations right now are trying to figure out what is that right balance to ensure that governance exists, but without stalling innovation in any way, shape, or form. Um, Something I think you've done a great job of, it's just saying a broad statement about goodwill and how you're leveraging AI. You in fact even did an AI symposium, a summit where a lot of leaders came together. And you asked the question too about how many organizations are operationalizing AI today. We did a quick chat poll. 31 have responded. We're sitting at about 60-40, right? 60% that yes, they have. So a lot of organizations, every organization is kind of grappling with this right now. But you hit on something really important is that it's a cultural change. So as much as, yes, technology is always causing us to go where the puck is going. But you've talked about in the past AI adoption being less of a technology problem and more of a change management problem. What do you think is the most important element of that change? What's hardest for nonprofit leaders to grasp onto at this time around AI?
I think this is kind of broad. And again, this is just my take, right?
Yeah.
Not Goodwill, just, Ed speaking here. I don't know if we fully understand what generative AI really represents. And so it's my belief that generative AI, and I mentioned it earlier, is really solving for time poverty as a barrier to employment.
Mm.
And I think everybody understands that time is a commodity, right? And understanding where we can find time, it not only can help the business, but more importantly, can help us on our personal lives, right? And so for us at our organization, when we started teaching AI literacy in our workforce development programs, in particular, we started at some pretty high stress environments like battered women's shelters and homeless shelters and so on and so forth. And where we were realizing 9 out of 10 stories about use cases were how people were using it at home and how it was moving the needle in their family lives and their individual lives. And we had the epiphany about a year ago that we need to be really deliberate about teaching AI literacy, but more importantly, domestic use cases AI. And so, we partnered with another tech partner on developing curriculum around AI at home kind of training. So, how do you do it yourself projects? How do you use it for budgeting? How do you use it for scheduling? Teaching people how to take pictures of their pantries and their refrigerators and like give me a little 20-minute recipe so I can feed my kids. We teach people how to use it for purchasing. If you have really big purchases like a car or a refrigerator, how can you use the tools to be really educated on it? And so what we realized was as we started teaching this from a cultural standpoint within our organization, people started understanding what it can do and what it couldn't, right? And then a lot of those skills that they're building at home using the tools are really translatable and transferable into the workplace, right? Buying a car using AI and helping kind of negotiation and what questions do I need to ask, that self-advocacy standpoint. How does it affect my credit? All these different things. All of that is really translatable in a business context, in that, oh, you can use these cool tools to help with purchasing, right? You can use these tools to help automate some of my personal workflows and my calendar and so on and so forth. And so I think for me, I think I'm hoping that nonprofits really lean into that space because what it does is it allows people to kind of create on their own and really conceptualize and get over a lot of that fear of what it is. But then also being open with meeting people where they are because there is a lot of anti-AI sentiment. There is a lot of fear. There is a lot of this notion, this hype cycle of, oh, the white collar jobs are going away, massive job disruption, and all this kind of media fear around it. When the reality of it is that I'm cautiously optimistic in the fact that it's the reconstitution of what the American dream could look like, right? You have a really great idea, and now all of a sudden your language is no longer a barrier, your education may no longer be the barrier that it once was, that AI is representing this democratization of knowledge. And so when I think of my program participants, single mother, two kids, two jobs, maybe has 30 minutes to herself, if I can find a way to free up 2, 3 hours of her kind of daily grind, that's better health for her, that's better sleep, that's time for her to build skills, that's more time with her children, to be a better parent. Like that's what I see conceptually as what AI really represents. If we do it in a very intentional way, in a way that shows what, again, that notion of what was once impossible is now possible, right? So even within the battered women's shelter, share one quick anecdotal story. We had this lady who was struggling, had a car repoed, getting out of really harsh environment, and she wanted to repair her credit so she can get an apartment, right, for her
Yeah.
and her kids. And we use Copilot to help kind of, all right, well, let's ask Copilot, what should we do in this situation? Well, come to find out, if she would have made a call to a collection agency, would have opened her case back up, which would have harmed her credit again, and armed her with this agency and this way to advocate for herself when talking with a financial advisor that we connected her with to try to get her on the right path. And that's just one of hundreds of stories of different use cases of what was once impossible from her standpoint of, I don't have a financial advisor, I don't have a legal expert, I don't know what questions to ask. And so again, just that framework of what's impossible, what was once impossible is now possible for our program participants has been absolutely game changing.
Incredible, Ed. I thank you for sharing that story. I put a note out into the chat. I'd love for folks to share, if you have a favorite personal use case. I mean, mine probably continues to be the bedtime stories that I can tell my 9-year-old, incorporating her into the cast of characters and creating images. Just game changing at the end of an exhausting day. And, when we think about the communities and the folks that we serve, to your point, Ed, they don't have access sometimes to the professionals or to the legal advice or the financial advice. Copilot does, and other models obviously do as well. And I think that's the key element is opening up that world of possibilities for those that we serve. There's been some additional chatter in the chat specifically on, the element of, I think, the governance versus innovation balance. And so I want to spend another moment there. I think because again, like it's there's so many elements that you've touched on around the building of culture, the change management piece. Um, but we've got to make sure the people don't feel like they have to innovate in the shadows. We want to make sure we're, bringing people into the fold to share these ideas. How can leaders today design governance in a way that can create trust and speed at the same time?
Yeah. So, difficult question, right? Because I think right now the governance and a lot of those issues are, I think there's some misnomers around the fact that if you haven't leaned in at this point that you're protected, and that is not the case, right? If you haven't leaned in yet, you're more at risk than those that have leaned in. So, kind of changing that framework, because if you ask any, and again, this may be a controversial topic, and if there are any IT leaders on the call, I apologize in advance. But if you ask someone who is very staunch against operationalizing different AI tools, if you can ask them if they can guarantee their job that no one in the company has let out proprietary information, then you are a unicorn, right? And so part of it is just level setting expectations of that, okay, the cat's out the bag at this point. Really, what do we need to do? Now, our organization, we, using our Microsoft stack, we created what we call an AI sandbox, and that's defined in different ways, but we use this open web UI interface. with some NAN integrations for our agentic works, but our entire data stack and our entire security is in our Microsoft stack. And so
Yeah.
what we did was we created a way where we can do API calls to allow different generative AI tools to really allow a safe environment for employees just to come in and tinker and play and test ideas. And we've been very deliberate about some of the educational components of it. So we formed what we call the AI Forge, which is very deliberate learning in small groups, about 8 to 10 people, where people will come and just learn all of the different AI tools that are available. But encourage them to be like, hey, what problems are you looking at? What is the most mundane, redundant things that you hate doing that isn't adding value, that isn't helping support people? Let's start there and just create that kind of ecosystem. But the way that we control our governance standpoint is creating that sandbox that is encouraging people to come and play. And so for us, we had this boost of engagement there, and then it kind of tailed off as people were still learning the tools and so on and so forth. And then I'll share a quick little anecdotal story. We had a regional district director with no tech background create a financial literacy tool for her store management of, doing more than just reading a P&L, but then also if-then analysis. So if these 5 data points say this thing, go look and do this thing. And she created 90% of it by herself
It's awesome.
using some of the Copilot tools and some of the sandbox tools, and then reach out to our IT team and be like, hey, can you help me with this data stuff on the back end? And she presented that for the first time to our 41 store managers. And let me tell you, it was like magic, right? You had oohs and ahs. And then the very next day or the very next Monday, she presented on Friday. And the very next Monday, we had a spike of enrollment in people wanting to come through the forge to get the education, right? And so when I talk about culture, it's not necessarily me driving the narrative down. It is the fact that here is someone who is not a technologist, had no tech background, been tinkering and learning the tools on her own, and had a great idea that can truly transform our business, and felt comfortable enough to come to us and be like, hey, I got this tool, can you help me with it? Right? That's a very different space than organizations that haven't leaned in. And it's like, oh, don't do that, right? Don't do that, you can get in trouble. Oh, I don't want to give you that because I'm scared you're going to replace me if I show you how I do that thing. That is the antithesis of what culture needs to look like for nonprofits in particular, because your subject matter experts aren't necessarily at the top. They're your boots on the ground, people that are dealing in the mud and in the muck, trying to transform people's lives. Those are the people that know what's holding people back, right? So all of the brilliant ideas are coming from the bottom up for us anyway. That's really transforming not only how we're doing business and how we become more efficient and effective, but really how do we deliver mission, right? How do we educate, and how do we improve people's lives using the tool? And that's what I'm really hoping nonprofits really embrace, is that yeah, there's the business side, no money, no mission, right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be that. But the reality of it is like, oh, wait, I can serve these 20 more people because I just use a transcription tool to do case management. Like, I don't need to type that in anymore. Like, there's so much low-hanging fruit that allow you to do better services out in a mission. So for me, it's becoming almost a categorical imperative, right? It's like, if we don't lean in, how many people are we not serving now? How many people are not going to be educated with AI literacy to be able to stay market relevant? With every entry kind of white collar job has this expectation that you know how to use the tools. Are we now doing a disservice from a workforce development standpoint, especially by not leaning in and educating on these tools? But again, not to sound heavy-handed there, but we've seen such progress and excitement around it and alleviating fear. But even on the fear front, like, yeah, you should be afraid. Like, we
Yeah.
don't know how great this technology is going to be. It could absolutely be disruptive. And the notion of people who use AR will replace people that don't. Like that, I think that's probably going to be a reality, whether it's within your organization or outside. And so meeting people where they are and acknowledging, no, it's a healthy to have some skepticism,
Right.
and that's a good place, that's a proper place to be, right? And just meet them where they are, have open dialogue around it, make sure you have your governance and your principles around it. Because we struggle with that too, around energy usage, water usage, and Goodwill being leaders in
Yeah.
sustainability, right? And so for us, it's like, yeah, no, all those things matter, right? But if we're not teaching our employees and our program participants that these tools exist, are they no longer going to be market relevant here in the near future? And so I implore nonprofits, like, if you're not lean in for the people that you serve, right? The people that are coming into the door, and do it for them.
I love that, Ed. Look, I mean, first off, what you just said about the ideas from the front lines, staying at the pulse of what's happening on the front lines, trying to solve those problems, but also gleaning ideas from that is literal gold. And I think about it, hey, we're in an ambiguous time. There's no exact idea of where, this is going, what the technology is going to be capable of doing. Skilling that we did 6 months ago is mostly obsolete.
Yep.
And that's why, when I talk to somebody who says, oh yeah, we did some training 6 months ago, it's time to get back into the classroom, right? I mean, the virtual classroom, we got to make sure that we're aware of, what's out there now, what capabilities exist. When I got up in front of a few hundred executives from Goodwill, a few months back at your Goodwill AI conference, one of the things that I challenged people about and asked people about was, hey, would you say that you're leveraging AI LLMs on a daily basis? All hands go up, but are you using it for 50% or more of your processes? And hardly any went up. I'm all day, every day, especially I'd say the activities that don't aren't the reason that I get up out of bed in the morning. If I can apply AI to analyze my reports, to also do those if then scenarios. Hey, how can I craft this into a executive ready document, or a customer ready briefing, or how can I turn this long transcript of a meeting into my go-dos that I need to send to my direct reports, whatever it is. These things that used to take an hour now take seconds. And that's real power because it's handing time back. The time poverty piece is a key element. And lots of great conversation in the chat. I appreciate that. Colin McCarty, if you don't already know Colin, sounds like they're doing a lot of great stuff out of Columbus. So I'm
Fellow
guessing
Goodwiller.
I
Colin's
know.
amazing.
I know. I'm guessing you guys are connected.
Yeah.
David, great comment from David. So the AI sandbox sounds like a very interesting model. Can we get some more detail about what it looks like and how we can build and set up something similar? How would you replicate this, Ed? If you're giving some guidance to other nonprofit execs out there, how can this be replicable?
Oh, I think the fact that you're on this call and have contacts with Microsoft is a great place to be, right? And so I will say, your Carson actually really framed it up right, and I would even reframe it in a similar way in that how can AI help with this? Like with literally everything, right? Like building this mental model of, can AI help me with this? That is an excellent question to ask Copilot or whatever your preferred LLM is how do I structurally create an AI sandbox? Now for us, like I mentioned, we use an open web UI interface. We do API calls to all the different models that we like. And we use N8N, which is kind of agentic workflow. We use a ton of the different, Fabric and Microsoft tool stacks in the back end as well, and essentially created this login portal where as an employee who has access to this can go and do those things. Part of that's brilliant too is that you can open up multiple models at one time, give it the exact same prompt, and really refine what you do. There are a lot of different ways to do this, so I'm not going to get into any more, too many technical side. And besides, my team is a lot better than I am at building those things. But that being said, I think using Copilot, using whatever you prefer to LLM to do some deep research aspects of it, to kind of frame that out and roadmap it for you. YouTube is an amazing tool. There's a lot of external content out there that can show you step by step how to build that out. And again, just like I'm sure all of you use at home, you want to learn how to change your oil. Most of us kind of go to YouTube to figure that out. It's the same kind of principle using LLMs and some of these other ones is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel for a lot of this stuff, right? None of
Yeah.
this, what we're building isn't necessarily novel, and there's already so many different agentic tools on the Microsoft platforms that you can kind of borrow and adopt and things like that. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it, but there's a tremendous amount of free resources out there to help you think about how do you create that sandbox in a way that is going to be cheaper for you by doing API calls in a structured way, right? I mean, sometimes as you get to the agentics, it can get expensive, but understanding how the math works as well. But again, I think part of the open sandbox or the AI sandbox is really allowing you to build culture around shared engagement, right? It's more, and I learned this from a mentor at one of my CEO mentors within the Goodwill movement. He said, Ed, it's not all about buy-in. It's about how do you move from buy-in to co-creation. You get co-creation in an AI sandbox where you're vetting ideas and like pushing the envelope a bit about, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? Then you get a different level of rapid acceleration, rapid growth within that kind of segment is moving past just buy-in. No, let's go co-create this, right? You know the problem. I'm your technologist, or hey, we're going to get a technologist in the room, but we're really going to lean on that subject matter expert in these various departments within our organization, and that's really where you pick up a lot of steam. Because what happens is you as a leader, you're not the biggest advocate. The biggest advocate is Sally Joe, my accountant over here that had this brilliant idea that brought it to the table and say, hey, look at this really cool thing. That's how you change culture. Right. And so I think the AI sandbox approach is a great way to start building that kind of on ramp to that culture change to where you can have wide scale openness to adoption. Right. You're still going to have those late adopters. You're going to still have those never adopters. But even that small segment of power users can really transform your business and your mission.
So when I think about this, and there's some great chatter in the chat, keep it coming. Some good comments, and it harks me back to some conversations that I was having at the summit. Um, this isn't a tools conversation. It's all about a problem solving and capability solving conversation. And I talk about why I very intentionally left the commercial part of our business to come to nonprofit 3 years ago, and it was really because I wanted the opportunity to evangelize what's available from a resources perspective for our nonprofits. How do I help make Microsoft smaller for our
Mhm.
nonprofits? Because sometimes it's like navigating a behemoth organization. But to be a conduit to our folks in research or in healthcare or retail, supply chain, to be able to have those types of conversations, I can connect the dots with the conversations that are happening and the people and help create relationships. And, one of the greatest values that we have is our innovation hubs. These
Mhm.
exist. There's 15 in the country, there's 50 in the world. And these are technical architects at no additional cost to you, that can come and help you scope these types of things out. So obviously, there are very personalized elements of each of these conversations. If you're building a center of excellence around AI, or we're looking at very specific problems that we want to solve in HR or marketing or workforce enablement, these are things that we can build out, and they're not one and done. I mean, we can get resources to spend a day, go to pilot, go to proof of concept at no additional cost to you, and to help you scale these things out. That's why these exist. And my team and I exist to really champion these resources being leveraged for the nonprofits. So if you're not already talking to your Microsoft team, reach out to
Mhm.
me. Let's discuss. Let's see where we can better lean in and help. And I think you've done a great job of articulating the time poverty. There's chronic time poverty in the nonprofit sector. Um, I'd be interested to hear, how do you see AI changing not only what's possible for that frontline staff, but also when you think about the skills that people need to be prioritizing right now to really unearth the maximum, the optimum ability out of empowering frontline staff. What should we be focused on?
I think some low-hanging fruit is learn advanced prompt engineering, right? Is understanding how to appropriately do a prompt. I think most people just do like a couple sentence prompts when the real juice is the longer initial prompt when you really kind of communicate as though it's your executive assistant or your research expert or whatever, right? So understanding the importance of giving it a persona, showing it references of what good looks like, what bad looks like, giving the context, why you're looking to do the thing. And so I'd say like there's a ton of great resources out there in regards to advanced prompt engineering. It is not overly complicated on that front. I would say also understand the what agentics are in AI agents. I'm sure most of you have kind of heard about it. Maybe some of you have operationalized it. Our organization has probably been building AI agents now for close to a year. And essentially, that is understanding how these AI systems are going to talk to each other to actually solve problems. where right now most people are using it to solve tasks, but not necessarily having it solve problems. And we're at that point now. We're at that inflection point where generative AI is becoming having the ability to actually rationalize and prompt itself to clarity and get a better product. I also think that having a framework of understanding that the today the when you use AI today, that's the worst it's ever going to be.
Yeah.
Right. And so understanding that even within the last 6 months, and I teach a class, right? I mentioned I teach a class,
Mhm.
and I was touting platforms like Sora with OpenAI. Well, Sora's gone, right?
Right.
And understanding the pace of that in some of those tools. And so the coding has just had generational jumps recently. I personally have coded my own website and user interface and backend data architecture. I'm not a technologist.
Mhm.
And I was able to do some pretty profound things. And so when I think about from a nonprofit perspective of what I could lean in now, it's understanding a couple things. So there's low-hanging fruit like prompt engineering, but there's also understanding how AI actually works, right? Or generative AI in particular. All it's doing is functionally doing a random selection of what the most probable next word is following another. Fundamentally, that's all it does. Now, it does it on trillions of data points in a way that we may not quite understand because of the black box effect of some of it, but that's functionally all it does. So understanding how it works is super important. So understanding things like AI scaling laws, the reason why there's so much money coming into the space for AI development, why there's so much money coming into space for AI infrastructure, energy and water investments, is that we haven't even reached the top of AI scaling laws less yet. It hasn't
Mhm.
proven out that AI is going to stop getting better. And so if you understand where the money's flowing and why it's flowing in that way, if you understand fundamentally how generative AI works, you're going to be less afraid of it and you're going to understand how to get the most out of it, right? And
Yeah.
so I would highly recommend if you're AI, if you're a leader and you can afford to do classes, they have executive classes at universities all across the country at this point to get really quick sprints and understanding kind of basic level things to get you up to speed and a comfort level. That will do your organization wonders, right? Because it gets you over the fear. It gives you a deeper understanding. You get to see some of the potential what the tools can do for those that haven't leaned in. But it's really starting there. If you're a leader of an organization, because if you don't understand how it works, you're not going to know where the threats are or the opportunities. And so, I've been very deliberate about investing in my professional development, staying on top of it, just so I can think strategically about it, right? There's operational tactics, but as nonprofit leaders, we have to broaden that out, right? It's more than just crafting emails. Like that's old hat, right? Well, it's a totally other thing when you're using it as a strategic partner and thought leader alongside, fleshing out real strategies, working through real problems in that way, and help you solve for some of those problems. So I know I gave like a bunch of different things, but advanced prompt engineering, executive education, and understand AI scaling laws and where the money is going and why it's going in the way that it does, at least gives you some conceptual oversight of where you probably need to lean in strategically.
You brought up so many really incredible and important critical variables that all of us are thinking about right now. You touched on the sustainability piece, and this is a pledge that Microsoft is making, especially even going in where data centers are being built. Working directly with those governments and ensuring that we're leaving the land better than it was when we came in, and we have carbon-free and water-efficient data centers, sustainable AI infrastructure by design. There's those elements, making sure that it's done the right way. There's also the uncertainty of where it all goes. Like, when do we reach that point where AI is as good as it's going to get? And I mean, I think we're all trying to figure out. I think Amy Hood, our CFO, has one of the most challenging jobs in tech because really just trying to figure out the right investments to make and making sure that organizations like yours and all those that Microsoft serves and supports have the infrastructure that they're going to need to be able to do the things that they want to do. What are these legacy making changes and decisions that we want to be able to make? And then lastly, Microsoft Elevate, the very impetus for our existence, is we identify nonprofit and education as two mission critical industry verticals where, with the inevitability of AI diffusion, there are massive disparities that happen globally because AI is not going to be adopted in all places equally.
Mhm.
Specifically when there's still places that don't have mobile broadband or have broadband and the ability to connect to the internet, much less leveraging AI. And we take that very seriously. We take that commitment seriously. You're on the front lines, Ed, and that's why Microsoft Elevates exists to support you and other nonprofit leaders. You're a nonprofit leader today. And I know sometimes not knowing exactly where you're going, it's challenging to make decisions. But as we kind of wrap up, what I'd love to glean from you is how do you make the decisions in a daily basis of what types of outcomes are most
Mhm.
important? What are your metrics? What are your KPIs? What does success look like a year from now in the AI landscape? How should nonprofit leaders be thinking about that right now?
So it's a great question, and I think it's a very individual question based on the mission of the organizations, right? But for us, it's on the AI front currently, it's about awareness and access, right? The same issues we've had for the last few decades in regards to the digital divide is the same. What makes generative AI different from any nonprofit in the space is that you really are looking at the democratization of knowledge, right? And there's an MIT study that was posted a few months ago that showed that someone without a college education with using generative AI tools versus a college graduate not using AI tools, there was already a 75% skills gap reduction with that, right? So understanding that there are real societal implications of the fact that knowledge is now democratized. You have biases in systems, you have ethical quandaries, right? Just because you can build something, should you build something? And taking a step back, I'll give a quick little anecdotal story. We created an AI chatbot where you can have a conversation with our handbook that had some integrations with our payroll systems and so on and so forth. So if you wanted to ask a question, how much PTO do I have? You could. Then we had the great idea of, well, why don't we put a bunch of Goodwill history in that chatbot so people can feel connected to the mission of Goodwill? And then we're like, well, wait, can we find our recording of the founder of Goodwill back in the early 1900s, found a radio recording of Edgar Helms, the founder of Goodwill, and we were able to kind of rip his voice and basically your conversation with the AI chatbot is with the founder of Goodwill. But when we built it, I had to take a step back and I'm like, well, hold up. I know the grandson of Edgar Helms. I better call and make sure he's okay with me doing that type of thing, right? But even that created an ethical conversation because then we talked about, well, we need to take a step back because what if we would have recreated, we had an employee unexpectedly pass away right after she retired. What if we recreated her in the same way? How would we feel about that? Of course, everyone's like, oh, I don't think so. That's, too soon, things like that. So part of it was even amongst the development of some of the tools, you always have to have an ethical lens in it. You always have to make sure a human's in the loop on that front. So I mentioned the ethics and these are real. We are not prepared, I think, from a society standpoint to really start answering these questions yet. Because some of the use cases, especially when we get to agentics, and that becomes more commonplace, once AI, you're seeing a rapid development in robotics, even in synthetic data. There's so much potential coming down the pipe that I'm scared to even talk about because I don't want to frighten anybody either, right? And so
Right.
what happens when AI starts interacting with the physical world, and you're seeing some of that happening in kind of global politics, local politics, and so on and so forth. And so part of it is just understanding, okay, how do I stay abreast of the information? How do I stay on top of it? How do I not get overwhelmed either and control what you can control, right? And so but like right now is such a neat time, because we're kind of AI natives, right? We're building the future as it's coming toward us, and it's coming toward us quicker than we're able to adapt. But what I implore anyone on the call and anyone that will watch this is you got to lean in. You have to understand it. You have to understand where it's going. And if you're in a nonprofit space, really question whether or not you're doing a disservice to your mission by not leaning in at this point because it is, it's kind of like the internet. There aren't chief internet officers, right? It's kind of, that innovation cycle. like AI is now part of the fabric of society. And so if you don't understand that, or if you haven't embraced the fact that it's not going away, regulation takes a decade, all these things, and you have to understand where the threats and opportunities are. You got to lean in. I just implore everyone, for the sake of the people that you serve, understand what it is, understand what it can and cannot be, and understand, try to have some understanding of where it's going.
It's a great call out. I know in our conversations, and I've also been fortunate to, to read some of the things that you've written, Ed, around the topic of AI. You talk about nonprofits as a social safety net during periods of disruption. I'm curious, like, what responsibility, do you think that gives nonprofit leaders as AI accelerates, and how can we be thinking about shaping policy and investment in public understanding because of that unique responsibility?
Yeah, so nonprofits, I want to say the number is around 14, 15% of the GDP of most states. And one thing that we're trying to do at Goodwill here in Pennsylvania is we're trying to coordinate nonprofits. And part of, you mentioned the Goodwill AI Summit in Pennsylvania. For those of you, any of you in Pennsylvania, in October, we are hosting AI Summit, and we're opening up the nonprofits across the state of Pennsylvania. And part of that is to get us into an ecosystem to where we can start having conversations as leaders in this space, because you have, billions of dollars of investment coming in around economic development is. But there's a workforce development component around there. There's mental health. There's a lot of different needs in that segment. And I think we need, as a nonprofit sector, need to somewhat mobilize and have an understanding of what is our collective impacts in regards to the economy as a whole, trying to find our collective voice in that space to where we can inform policymakers and big tech partners of, hey, this is what's really happening, boots on the ground with your tools. These are the real world implications of this. We can help you craft that future. We can be, that voice in the local community to help kind of reshape or reframe it. Because I think part of the problem, and if I had a magic wand, part of the problem with generative AI, it's a marketing problem, because we're talking
Mm.
about the wrong things. We're talking about how disruptive it can be without understanding that, but my program participant has a great idea and actually build a business using these tools to help support their future and their family. And so when I talk about that, like, is generative AI the reconstitution of what the American dream looks like, where you have a little grit and you work out of your garage and use these tools to flesh out these ideas? Like, to me, that's a beautiful future for any individual that kind of wants to lean in. And so from a nonprofit segment, what I would love for us collectively to really think about at a local, national level is, okay, how can we come together and be a bigger voice and a bigger advocate for the ethical use cases of AI, for for the great opportunity that AI can do, but then also, where is the harm coming? And so again, we have a lot of nonprofits on the call with various different missions that all probably have a different point of view on some of this stuff. We need to find a way to collect, to be that boots on the ground checks and balances of all this investment, right? And again, that's not to inhibit it, right? I mean, you mentioned data centers. If you're in a community where you're losing 10% of your population year over year and you have dirty water, you don't have high speed internet, like, can you use this as an opportunity to reinvent the community by getting clean water? And because the investors are coming in, they need that. Right. And so I think part of the notion is that, yeah, is a AI data center great for every community? No, absolutely not. Can it be disruptive? Absolutely. But it could also be a way for those rural communities, some of these kind of flighting communities to really think through, all right, well, how do we reinvest some of these resources in the community to support the people that are there and keep the people in those communities? So again, that's just my opinion. I'm not speaking opinion on anybody else, but
Sure.
part of it is just getting past the hype cycle in media to understand, okay, no, look, this isn't going away, but it really could impact us positively or negatively. And as a nonprofits, we owe it to ourselves, because at the end of the day, when we talk about reskilling, when you talk about boots on the ground stuff, we shouldn't be doing it alone, right? There are resources out there that can help our collective missions make sure that we are that social safety net. But if we're not advocating for that, if we're not collectively voicing that, we're going to typically the last ones to the trough, and we shouldn't be in this time because of the amount of disruption that's already here, but is likely coming, positively and negatively.
Yeah, you said something earlier that really resonated with me, and I wanted to resurface it a little bit because I want to go into, as we go into the final questions, really talking about that change management piece because to your point, everybody's in a different spot. But right now we're doing some executive one-to-one coaching on Copilot and on some of these tools, really making sure that people understand how to best engage and interact. And you said something earlier about talking to it like it's your assistant, and it's a very valid point. I based on the transcription services, I'll just hit record on Copilot and talk to it and say, "Hey, this is the," and I'll attach documents,
Mhm.
maybe screenshots or images. I take pictures of my notes. I'm old school. I don't have my laptop up in meetings. I'll take notes and I'll
Yep.
take pictures of my notes. Fortunately, it understands my chicken scratch and I'll tell it what to do with the data. Based on this BI dashboard, I need you to call out the metrics that are most important for my team and I to be, looking at right now based on this marketing conversation or whatever it is. And, talking to it like it's my assistant and then having it, come back with all this information. And sometimes that can be, some of the most game changing and time freeing in a
Mhm.
given day. But as we're obviously talking to a lot of leaders in the nonprofit space today, there's a lot of organizations that are risk averse
Yeah, yeah,
and
100%.
resource constrained and frankly weary of changes. There's been a lot, the nonprofit sector's been through a lot over the last couple of years. How, if you're leading in this time, how can you be putting the right steps in place to create and keep momentum in this critical time?
So I would say that where generative AI has helped me as a CEO, it's given me so much more time to be strategic,
Mm,
right? Because I'm not wasting time doing the mundane things. I'm not wasting a lot of time doing kind of the old school paperwork. I'm like you. I take pictures of my notes and load it and help me conceptualize. I use it as a strategic thought partner. I mentioned that before, but I'm like, hey, I have this idea, pressure test it for me, right? What questions do I need to ask? What are the pitfalls? But the more I've been able to automate in the mundane in my life, which again, I'm a CEO, right? So I'm expensive labor. And so like part of it is that just from an organizational standpoint, as leaders in nonprofits, if you're spending too much time being tactical and you're not thinking about the future of the organization, how successful are you really going to be? So if you can shift, and I have this kind of rule of thumb for my executives as a construct, is that I typically try to live 2 to 3 years out, right, as a
mm,
CEO. And luckily, I have an amazing team that allows me to not necessarily get into the weeds of operations in a way. But even at my C-suite, my expectation is that 70% of the time is thinking strategically, right? That's how are we going to generate more revenue? How are we going to become more efficient? How are we going to serve more people, right? I mean, that's essentially what the board directive is too. At the VP level, 50% of your time strategic, 50% of your time operational. Director level, 30% of your time strategic, 70% of the time operational. What generative AI is allowing us to do is taking that tactical things that took a lot of time, but not maybe not a lot of efficiency or effectiveness, and give us more time to be strategic. So philosophically, that's what I'm hoping the leaders on the call start thinking about is how do I get that time back to be more strategic so I can do more of the risk analysis? So I can use AI to tell me, hey, where are the trends, right? The fact that you can do deep research with these models can help you flesh out true novel research, right? I built a database and had to do research and build it in a way that I would have never been able to do that now is allowing me to fine tune and build different new pathways, right? So point being is that at a philosophical level as leaders, really think through how valuable is more time to be strategic and think about AI as a tool that allows you more time to think about your business, to think about your mission. How are you going to serve more people? Because if you're doing the mundane stuff with this and you can automate all that, Is it a good resource? Are you being good stewards of the funds that you're receiving?
Yeah.
When you can do these things, like we have internal debates all the time. It's like, if we don't operationalize this, does this mean five people don't get served because we've wasted 20% of our time doing things like grant management and copy for marketing and things like that. Again, always having a human in the loop. But the reality of it is, as leaders, we need to think strategically. We need more time to be strategic, but that's really hard. And I want to say this because I recognize it. The problem now is that the need to reskill and upskill existing employees, there's not enough time,
Mm.
right? And so when you're in the drudgery, when you're in the weeds, when you're doing that tactical stuff, who has time to reskill and upskill,
Right.
right? And so for us, the reason why we did the AI Forge is we're really deliberate. We're going to spend an entire day learning these tools, learning from each other. We're going to make it a priority that we're staying on top of this, And so you have to find ways to create time. So if you're not using it with AI, well, spend it on the professional development of learning AI, and then naturally over time, you're going to find other times to be able to automate some of your workflows. So anyway, I know I talked high level philosophical, but the
Good.
reality of it is that we need more time to be strategic because the status quo has changed, man. And that's not, and it's on steroids at this point with the pace of AI, and the abilities and capabilities that these tools are doing. So if you're spending more time being tactical, you're in trouble, right? You're in trouble because of the pace of technological change in the world of AI. And again, I don't want to be chicken little with the skies falling. There's more opportunity than I think there's threats, in some, depending on what your mission is. But at the end of the day, the pace of change is too great for you to lean into the tactical as a nonprofit leader, right? Now you're mid management, and your job is being tactical. Of course, that's still going to be necessary, but the reality of it is, if you're not making sure that you're mandating time to be strategic, the world will pass you by like Ferris Bueller.
And as leaders, empower and enable your people that are afraid their job is going away to solve problems in their work and be the change. I don't think any of us are sure what job we'll have in the next year to 5 years, much less what our kids are going to do. But I think the key element is making sure that we're continuing to apply the technology to solve real problems. And frankly, like you just said about skilling, Ed, I'm continuing to see more and more not only that we are doing from an AI skilling perspective within Elevate, but also like LinkedIn for nonprofits. If you have any questions about resources, things that are available, please reach out. And there's so many important conversations. There's a great question in our chat about, really happy we're looking at the big picture and ethics. It can be a great tool. One potential harm is AI mimicking voices for nefarious purposes. This is all the more reason why it's critical to have the right governance. Because I kid you not, I've heard of, AI being leveraged to mimic, um, the CEO's image and voice, to have a conversation with an employee. And
Yep.
so we've got to be really careful as leaders that we have the right guardrails in place to protect against these outside tools being able to infiltrate our environments. We are the second, after healthcare, the second most cyber attacked industry vertical. And we've got to make sure that we're safeguarding our employees and those that we serve each and every day. You guys are doing very important work, and that's why Microsoft is a partner in that, to make sure that you're as protected and as effective as you can possibly be.
Yeah. And Carson, let me give a plug to the Innovation Hub. My organization has been a direct benefit of a lot of that work. For those of you that are interested in that type of work, let me tell you, it's been game changing for us. Even just being in the room with some of these technologists and seeing how they're viewing the world is valuable in itself. But Microsoft has been an amazing partner to Goodwill nationally. I mean, you guys came and partook in our Goodwill AI Networking Summit, and really and put that knowledge on the broader movement of Goodwill. And so anyway, I just wanted to make sure that the room knew that, hey, that's legit. Like
Thank you,
those
Ed.
are real resources, game changer resources, that are available to you, and I hope you lean in.
You're a great leader and partner, and frankly, I think I intentionally stayed away from talking a lot about particular tools today because, again, that is not the conversation. The conversation right now is leadership, and it is, the important decisions that executives like you are making each and every day. As we wrap up, Ed, anything else that you wanted to make sure we touched on before we sign off of this wonderful session?
I'm just so thankful for all the nonprofit leaders out there, blood, sweat, and tears in service of their communities. I hope I didn't come off as heavy-handed on this, but I see so much opportunity for the people that we serve by leveraging these tools and advocating on behalf of the people that we serve in this space, right? And again, that's what I'm imploring us all to do is yeah, there's the business side, but at the end of the day there are people on the side of that business, and more important, or equally as importantly, we are impacting the communities in which we live. And so this technology will continue to do that, whether you're in rural or suburban or urban environments. There's more opportunity than I think we're even aware of. And so I can't wait to learn from all of you and seeing how you're changing lives using the tools. And I wish you all best of luck. Please feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions. Feel free to send me a request, and would love to watch everyone on their journey. And hopefully we can be of some help in that. And hopefully this was a valuable use of time.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ed. As may be evident to everyone, I like to go out and find people that have even more energy than I do. And so I was successful today with finding Ed. Ed, thank
It's my
you for the.
Microsoft coffee, man. That's what happened. I
Hey,
shouldn't have drunk it out of this.
there you go. I can relate to that. So Ed, thank you. And if you're out there today and you want to be one of our next webinar stars, let me know. Well, I'm looking intentionally to really build more community in this space. Just of ways where we can be a conduit to um, adding that type of value, getting you connected with other leaders like Ed. So if Microsoft and Microsoft Elevate or I can support you in any way, shape, or form in your mission, reach out to me and let me know. But thank you so much for the time. Great to be with you today. And we will see you next time. Thank you, Ed.
All right. Thank you, Carson. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.